It's time for Mic'd Up. This time of the show we dedicate to hearing from unique and cool people doing some unique and cool things. Conversations, not sound bites. Today, Adam Longo gives us an inside look into the National Museum of the U.S. Army through artifacts that tell the story of our nation's heroes.
So we're in Fort Belvoir, Virginia today at the National Museum of the United States Army. Why? Well, because retired Colonel Cliff Wheeler sent Reese an email after seeing a story that Reese had done about the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment and said, hey, Reese, they got some of their stuff on display at the museum. Well, you know how we roll with tips. Once we hear them, we got to come check them out. We're inside now with Paul Mirando, who is the Chief Curator of the National Museum of the United States Army. Thank you so much for hosting us. Talk to us about the exhibit that we're in right now and sort of what years it covers and what you want us to see.
So we're in the Preserving the Nation gallery, which focuses on the Civil War. So the artifacts and the stories that you'll see sort of represent what soldiers went through during the Civil War, the technology that they used, the weapons, the uniforms that they wore.
What broadly, just to get into this, can you tell us about the 54th?
Well, the 54th was the first all-African-American regiment established during the Civil War. And the flag that we have on display was carried by Sergeant William Carney. So what you see here is the original flag that was carried during the Battle of Fort Wagner by the 54th Massachusetts. And you can see the gilded stars on it. And this was the flag that Sergeant Carney recovered when the original flag bearer went down. And he used the flag to rally the troops to safety. They were getting slaughtered. But Sergeant Carney saw the flag go down, picked it up, and used it as a rallying point for his fellow soldiers to escape. During that time when African-American soldiers were enlisted in the Army, there was the belief that they couldn't be brave soldiers, they couldn't be disciplined. So that action not only sort of proved to the Army that Sergeant Carney could do this, but that African-Americans could be just as brave, just as disciplined as white soldiers.
And this is a theme that we see repeated throughout the museum, right? Where we're not just telling the story about a regiment or a battalion, we're telling that story through the eyes of one soldier and how they played into it.
That's correct. The mission of this museum is to focus on the soldier stories, right? So the artifacts are mostly connected with soldier stories because it gives more power to that artifact. And it tells more not only about the Army, but about those individuals who served in the Army.
So you all are supposed to open your doors in June of 2020. There's obviously been a lot that's happened since then, so you probably haven't gotten all the kind of fanfare that you would have hoped for. What do you want people to know about the museum?
Well, we want people to learn about the history of the United States Army, but we also want them to connect with the stories and artifacts that are in this museum. So if they see something that they're inspired by, right, they'll get the opportunity to learn more about the history of the Army and the sacrifice that our soldiers have done for this country. You can see how it evolved, right? So you go from, from the Civil War and then to the creation of additional black regiments during World War I, and then eventually full integration with President Truman's executive order to integrate the services.
So many fantastic stories. I'm so excited to see all of them on display here. Thanks so much for sharing this with us. Really appreciate it.
Wow, that was fascinating, and credit to yourself, Adam, as well as the museum for highlighting those specific stories, because that's one of the things that really kind of gets me, kind of frothy when you have people that were willing to sacrifice all, but then also get forgotten by history on top of it.
Right, and now they have an entire museum dedicated to all of their stories. I mean, this place, if you've lived in D.C. your whole life and you feel like, I've been to all the museums, I've seen it all, this is on your must-do list. I mean, it's just right off 95 in Fort Belvoir, National Museum of the U.S. Army. Just opened in November of 2020. They were supposed to have a big, gala grand opening, and then the pandemic happened. So that sort of fell out. Now, I want to tell you a little bit more about the 54th, right? So you remember the movie Glory, right? 1989, Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington. That was the Battle of Fort Wagner, portrayed in that movie, and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment was part of that. Sergeant Carney was the first African-American recipient of the Medal of Honor as a result of his heroism during that battle. The 54th, even though it was the Massachusetts 54th, Frederick Douglass, his two sons came from D.C. and joined the 54th, as did other people other African-Americans across the East Coast and in New England. But the museum itself, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, they run the gamut from the Revolutionary War all the way through the Cold War. Some of the exhibits in there and the realism you would not believe. It's definitely on the must-see list.
That is incredible. Before you go, will a child who grew up in the DMV and expects all museums to be free be disappointed when they show up?
Absolutely 100% free.
Yay!
Parking too. All right, listen, reach out to me if you've got a tip. You saw that we got this story through a tip, so we want to hear your tips. That's how we're telling stories. Find me on social media or email me, alongo@wsa9.com.
I'll go tomorrow for free.